Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Forum here at UUSF. If you are new to the church, just want to mention that the bathroom is just outside the door on the left, and actually there's one on the right too. We have coffee and tea and breakfast. If you haven't already helped yourself to those, please do that. My name is Jeff Peckrell, and I am the chairperson of the Forum, and I'm a part of the Human Rights Working Group, of which Forum is one of our projects. The other co-chairs of the group are Dolores Perez-Halbrun and Melvin Starks, who is over there serving the delicious breakfast that we have today. Just want to mention a few things about upcoming forums before we introduce today's speaker. So next Sunday, a week from today, we have Tim Redmond, who is the editor of 48 Hills, and before that, The Guardian. We've had him many times here, and he is always a really great speaker, going to bring us up to date on what's happening in politics in San Francisco. So please be sure and come for that. And then we have a week off, and then on the 30th of November, we have Care Not Cops. We have someone named Lavender Phoenix presenting that session, which is talking about something called the People's Budget, and taking a look at how much money we really put into policing in the city versus other things that people need. And then we're kind of off for a few weeks. We have Amnesty International presenting on the last Sunday of December. We have a sign-up sheet. If you didn't come here because you got our emails and you'd like to receive our emails, just sign up on the sheet by the door, and we can do that. You can get them, not a lot, just like one a week is how it will be, couple of them per week. Just want to mention how we do the Q&A, and we hope you'll have questions today. We have cards on a lot of the chairs and the tables, so just jot your questions down, and we'll get to them whenever Saikat finishes his presentation. So we're going to do the Ohlone land recognition, and then I will introduce our speaker today, who is Saikat Chakrabarti. So Dolores, would you mind coming up and doing the Ohlone recognition, please?
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. We, the members of the First Unitarian Universal Society of San Francisco, acknowledge the Ramaytush Ohlone people who are the ancestral custodians of this land. We now pay our respects to the Ramaytush Ohlone, past, present, and future, who call this place, the land that our society rests upon, their home. We are proud to continue their tradition of coming together and growing as a community. We recognize that as the original stewards of this land, the Ohlone and other indigenous peoples have understood the interconnectedness of all life and maintained harmony with all of nature for millennia. We honor them now and thank them for their enduring commitment to our Mother Earth. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dolores. I'll say a few words now about our speaker today. We have Saikat Chakrabarti. He is a candidate for Congress. He's running for the 11th district seat, which is currently held by Nancy Pelosi. Saikat is, he has a background in the software industry, and he turned to a political strategist, best known for co-founding Justice Democrats and serving as the chief of staff of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, where he led the creation of the Green New Deal, which is something we've heard about. After building tools for Bernie Sanders' 2016 campaign and helping elect a new generation of progressive leaders, he now leads a policy think tank focused on delivering economic prosperity through a clean energy future. So it is my pleasure to introduce Saikat Chakrabarti.
Thank you so much, Jeff, and thank you all so much for welcoming me here. This is such a beautiful community y'all have created, and it's really such an honor to be able to address all of you here. And as Jeff said, my name is Saikat Chakrabarti. My parents didn't quite name me to run for Congress here, but here we are, right? But I'm the co-founder and president of the think tank New Consensus. And our mission is to show countries, especially this one, how to actually build a clean economy that can deliver prosperity for everybody. And for the past several years, we've been working on a very detailed, comprehensive plan that we've been calling the Mission for America, that's kind of a successor to the Green New Deal that we introduced with Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez in 2018. It's sort of our version of a Project 2025 that spells out exactly what do we do to really build an economy that works for all starting on day one, should we ever come back into power as Democrats. But you might have also heard, as Jeff mentioned, that I'm also running for Congress to represent San Francisco. And by far, the best part of running for Congress has been being able to meet all the amazing people in this great city. Whether it's in a beautiful church like this one or on the video calls that I do every single day with San Francisco residents, and I invite all of you to please join one of those calls. It's really amazing to talk to so many people from so many different backgrounds with so many different perspectives, and I've learned so much through the course of the campaign. But in preparation for this speech, I've been reflecting on the values of the Unitarian Universalist Church, and I've always admired this church because a commitment to justice and the inherent equality of all people, that at its heart is the founding ideals of our country. And I'd argue those are the defining values of this city. But as a lot of you know, those ideals are urgently at risk today. But in preparing for today, I decided I wanted to do more than just raise some alarm bells about things that we all know in this room that are going on. Instead, I wanted to share 3 stories, each about a time when justice and equality triumphed over hatred and division. Each story also reflects a fundamental truth, which is that the decision to embrace equality and justice or to cower to a wave of hate and intolerance, that's a political choice. It's a choice that we all have to make. So my hope coming out of today is that these stories are going to show that despite how dark things feel today, we will be able to move beyond the current wave of division and hatred that's defining American politics, and that with the right political movement and the right leadership, we can and will be a country that lives up to our foundational ideals. The first story I want to go into is personal to me because it's about my father. My father was born in what's now Bangladesh in 1946, about a year before the British partitioned India into 2 countries along religious lines. If you're not familiar with partition, it was one of the greatest tragedies of the 20th century. Basically, the government decided to divide the country up into India and Pakistan, Muslims in one part, Hindus in one part, and that catastrophic political decision displaced 15 million people and killed about 1 million more. And so my dad was just a baby when a group of my grandfather's students from the school that he taught at showed up at his home and told him that there was a mob coming for them the next day. And so they had to pack everything they could, whatever they could carry, and they fled overnight. They got on a boat and they took it up the Ganges River and they ended up in Calcutta. And when they reached Calcutta, they started off by squatting in an abandoned Muslim dentist's office, presumably a Muslim dentist who probably had to do the same thing, going the other direction. And so eventually, my grandfather managed to get a grant from the government to start a public school in that Muslim dentist's office. And so now my dad was growing up surrounded by dozens of kids, all displaced, in this place that was both their home and their school, just all crammed into one, right? But eventually, my grandfather managed to get my dad and their family of 12 into a tiny 1-bedroom apartment. So that was the big upgrade that my father experienced. So nothing in life was easy after partition. My dad would often go days without knowing where his next meal would come from. And my dad's childhood was the result of a political failure. Politicians had made choices that created chaos, displacement, and suffering for millions of people. And the Hindu-Muslim hate that we still see in that region today, that was manufactured by those choices. It still lasts today. But that wasn't the end of my dad's story. Because while my dad's childhood was a result of political failure, his adulthood was a result of political success. Because my dad had the chance to become an American citizen. My dad immigrated here in the 1970s, and at that time, America had just put a man on the moon. We had just built the interstate highway system. We had seen decades of rising wages and living standards, and America was so optimistic, so full of opportunity, that we weren't building walls to keep people out. We were actually begging people from all around the country to come here and help build this great nation. We had immigration offices all across the world recruiting millions and millions of people to come here. So that's how my dad actually got here. My dad's friend took him to one of these offices in Calcutta where this nice woman pitched him on the American dream, got him to apply for a visa right there on the spot. And I'll never forget what my dad told me going into that immigration office. His first thought was, how is the air so cold? Because he had never experienced air conditioning before, right? And I used to say in my stump speech that my dad came to his country with literally $20 in my pocket. Well, I went home a couple weeks ago and my dad fact-checked me on this. It was actually $8 in his pocket. But that was enough. He got a job, and on a single income, he was able to afford a stable middle-class life for me and my family. And growing up in suburban Texas, sure, money was tight sometimes, but I had everything I needed. I had a good life. I had a roof over my head, I had food on the table, I had health care, and I had a really good public school education. So I don't think that impoverished kid living in that schoolhouse in Calcutta could have ever imagined his future life here. He was one of tens of millions of victims of a political system that had embraced hatred and division. Yet he was able to live a life so great because America had done the opposite. Because at the time my dad came here, America was, more than ever, attempting to live up to its founding ideals. Because this isn't just my dad's story. It's the story of hundreds of millions of Americans, starting with the New Deal, all the way to the 1970s, who accomplished one of the greatest leaps in living standards that humanity has ever seen. The America my parents came to was a country where every generation knew they would be way better off than their parents. That was the American dream. And we built that dream together. We believed government's job was to make life better for everyone, and it worked. Wages rose, living standards soared. We created the greatest middle class in human history. We did it by daring to put the country on bold missions, whether it was to the moon or to end poverty and build a great society. We did it by building homes, schools, industries that provided great wages, the Central Valley Project, the Bay Bridge, the Golden Gate Bridge, everything that our growing society needed. We did it by investing in education, in science, in innovation. We did it by protecting workers and families through a strong social safety net and a strong labor movement. And we did it by expanding freedom through the civil rights movement, the women's rights movement, the gay rights movement, and all the movements of that time. We believed that the economy should exist to serve people, not the other way around. Now, I'm not saying that the 1970s and 60s and 50s were some utopia. They weren't, not by a long shot, even if some politicians try to convince us otherwise. Huge chunks of society were cut out of the American dream, and huge chunks of society still are today. But we were trying. That imperfect march towards progress, that's America. That continuous struggle to create a more perfect union, that's America. My father had no reason to believe that he would live in a society like this, yet he did. And I believe that is why all of us are here today, because we know what's possible, and we know we can get there. My second story is a story about San Francisco. Because from the beginning, San Francisco has been a destination for people seeking to become rich, from the gold prospectors in the 1800s to the tech workers today. But the real appeal of San Francisco has always been about more than money. San Francisco has always been about the opportunity to create a new life for yourself where you can live up to your potential and your authentic self. I moved to San Francisco in 2009 when I was 23, pretty much the first chance I got out of college. I've always wanted to live here because growing up in Texas, I'll be honest, San Francisco was paradise. We're innovative and entrepreneurial here, yeah, but we have this ideal to be fair and just and equal. It's not an ideal we always live up to, but it's still our ideal. We believe anyone can come from anywhere and we accept you. We're an actual melting pot. It's a beautiful thing, and I believe that should be America's ideal. Throughout American history, San Francisco has always fought for that ideal. When the country wouldn't move to do what was right, when it looked like we were on the brink of economic or democratic backsliding, San Francisco fought back. We have always been the home of the movements that fight to fix what the nation gets wrong. In 1934, When dock workers were told to accept starvation wages, San Francisco shut down the entire city in solidarity, and we unionized the entire West Coast. In the 1960s, when questioning the war was called unpatriotic, San Francisco streets filled with hundreds of thousands saying, "Not in our name." When loving who you love could destroy your life, San Francisco elected Harvey Milk and set America on a course for one of the greatest civil rights victories of our generation. What was that? Oh. None of these victories seem possible at the moment. Every single time, San Francisco was swimming against the current. But when America was falling short of its ideals, San Francisco didn't give up. And when the country wouldn't move, San Francisco pushed. Look, this was a political choice our city made together. It was a choice that was made by hundreds of thousands of people. It was not easy. A lot of people lost their jobs because of these choices, but they did it because they believed so deeply in the ideals of the city. It would have been easier to roll over and accept defeat, but San Francisco never did. And today, I believe that America needs San Francisco maybe more than ever to push again. It is up to us to prove that a diverse, innovative, fair, and just society can work, not just as an abstract concept, but as a lived reality. We need to show that we can build housing for everyone, including our most vulnerable, that we can care for people in crisis with dignity, that we can create prosperity that's broadly shared, not just concentrated in the hands of a lucky few, and that we can be a true melting pot where anyone from anywhere is welcome. San Francisco was the heart of so many movements that helped shape America. And I believe that San Francisco will be the heart of the movement that defeats hate and intolerance today. Because where we lead, America follows. And my third story is about America. Because back in the 1930s, while America was stuck in the Great Depression, there was a huge far-right movement, not so dissimilar to the one today, that was filling Madison Square Gardens with these huge rallies full of swastikas and stormtroopers. Father Coughlin's anti-Semitic radio broadcasts were reaching 30 million Americans every week. It was a dark time. You even had major newspapers saying on their front cover that maybe America needs our own Hitler. People were ready to embrace the most vile forms of hate and intolerance because they felt that our system had failed them during the Great Depression. But we defeated that movement. And we didn't do it just for one election cycle. We defeated that movement for nearly 100 years. How? FDR came into power. And with the New Deal movement, he built a whole new economy and a whole new society through the New Deal and the mobilization for World War II. He improved people's lives so dramatically that it proved democracy can work. It killed the idea that you need some authoritarian to come in to deliver material change for people. And by doing that, we brought America back from the brink of fascism. I spoke a bit already about how, after that, Americans saw their living standards rise for decades. The economy that America built through the New Deal and the World War II era is one that was so prosperous that it actively wanted immigrants like my father. It's the same one that made San Francisco one of the most vibrant cities in the world that would go on to lead the fight for freedom and equality. But I left out how exactly we did it. Before and during World War II, the US doubled the size of its economy by making massive public investments into industry and infrastructure. And through these investments, though these investments were geared for war, the industries we created were easily convertible in peacetime to provide general prosperity. We used those industries to build more comfortable homes, faster transport, and the greatest healthcare system, education system, and other public services that the world had ever known. But we also use them to supply the rebuilding of a war-ravaged world, creating incredible amounts of wealth for tens of millions of working-class families in this country. Now, looking back, most Americans on the left will sometimes remember the war economy as having been built by central planning and coercion, whereas you got Americans on the right that remember it being built by ingenuity and the tenacity of patriotic private capital. But in reality, we did it using tools and methods that did not conform to any partisan orthodoxy. We did it by putting the country into this whole different mode of governing that at my think tank New Consensus, we've been calling mission mode. And mission mode is very different to how we govern today in three really important ways. The first is that in a country in mission mode, we'll often have a whole new kind of leadership that comes in with a movement that really puts the country on a mission. They don't just announce a mission, but they follow up and they actively push and follow through. They do the work of convincing society to join in the mission. That's what FDR did through his fireside chats every single week. It was also what FDR did by going around and persuading the CEOs of that time to join in on this mission, who often didn't want to do it because they were more interested in short-term profits rather than long-term prosperity. The second piece of mission mode is that countries will make comprehensive plans rather than just passing some policies and taking their hands off the steering wheel, which is what we do today. The irony is, actually pitching a plan like this that shows people the outcome of the mission makes it more possible to make that plan come to fruition. And the third big piece of mission mode is countries will build financing and coordinating institutions to make those plans a reality. America used to have all kinds of institutions like this all across our society. The largest by far was called the Reconstruction Finance Corporation. It was kind of like this public investment bank and project manager and venture capitalist that was run by the government, and it would go around figuring out all the problems that are keeping us from building what we needed to build, and it would figure out the bottlenecks and fix them and make sure we got it done. The irony is that we built that economy in such a rush that as a society, we didn't even remember or care how we did it. And soon after the war, we started to dismantle the very institutions that had built our prosperity. The story for why we did that is a long one with many twists and turns. It was partly because we thought these were just emergency measures, and so we don't need them in peacetime. It was partly because the CEOs of the big companies didn't like how much power it gave to workers in their companies. And it was partly because of racism. Because after the war, Southern Democrats in Congress believed it was their duty to dismantle these planning institutions because it had been interfering with their supply of practically indentured black workers in the South. And that's not a stretch. US representatives on the House floor explained that economic planning had to stop in order to preserve white supremacy. Their words, not mine. But while we dismantled our engines of prosperity, the rest of the world in ruins studied that playbook that we were tearing up. Systematically, every independent nation in the world in the post-war and post-colonial era strove in peacetime to build those same institutions, industries, and infrastructure that had served us during wartime. Where we had gone on a mission to fight a war, they had leaders and movements that put their countries on a mission simply to build up the wealth of their common people. They created comprehensive 5- and 10-year plans to develop their economies. They built public financing and coordinating institutions just like we had during the New Deal and the war, and frankly how we had in the 1800s and 1700s and even the 1600s. They rejected the law of the market and built industries that everyone said would never be able to compete with the mighty United States. That's how Japan created its auto industry when no one believed it could. That's how South Korea created its electronics industry when no one said they could. And it's how China is now building more rail and cars and steel than us as well. They called this system by the same name we used to use for it, the American system. So while we began the process of dismantling our mission-driven economy soon after the war, it wasn't until the late 70s and 80s that we fully flipped the switch. And as we have dismantled our means of making a living in this country, hate and intolerance have been on the rise, and that is not a coincidence. Politicians in both parties made a choice to destroy the economic foundation that enabled our long run of progress. They decided we shouldn't try to take on big missions as a society anymore. Instead, we should just hand over our economy to the corporations, let them decide where to go. And of course, the corporations paid them to do this. And the result of that has been decades of decline. The corporations have stripped our economy for parts, trying to maximize short-term profits over long-term prosperity. They've worked with politicians to gut unions, slash taxes for the wealthy, and cut the programs that built the modern-day middle class. And as a result, we stopped building affordable housing. We let healthcare become unaffordable. We transferred literally tens of trillions of dollars from working people to the richest in our society. Today, we've got teachers driving Uber at night just to afford groceries. We've got families going into debt over a medical bill. Even people making good money can struggle to afford housing in this city. Young people today do not expect to do better than their parents. In fact, they expect to do worse. The American dream has been shattered. We replaced a story of collective prosperity with a lottery economy. It's one where a few people can make ungodly amounts of money, while most people can barely make rent. And as a result, we found ourselves in the same position we were in the 1930s. Because our system is failing, we are once again seeing the rise of a hateful ideology in our country. Just this last week, Trump fought like heck to stop SNAP benefits for millions of Americans. This was the thing he wanted to fight to do, to make sure millions of Americans starve. We've watched masked agents kidnapping people off of our streets, throwing them into unmarked vans, picking up parents in front of their children, often beating parents in front of their children. We're watching the President of the United States deploy the military into our cities right now and label anybody who disagrees with him a terrorist. Fundamentally, his ideology, his politics, it's one that believes that poor people or people of color or people who think differently from him are not full humans worthy of dignity. It is the opposite of everything this church and this city and this country stands for. So I want to be clear about one thing. This isn't just about hate. Because Trump is orchestrating an authoritarian coup. Because a hateful ideology like his can never last in a true democracy. It requires fascism to stand around. But I want to be clear about something else. Our economic decline did not start with Donald Trump. Our economic decline made Trump possible. Because when democracy doesn't work to make people's lives better, it lays the ground for an authoritarian to say they alone can fix it. That your problems are being caused by immigrants, by trans people, by scientists. That if only you gave them power, they could tear it all down and rebuild it. And people, in their desperation for change, go for it. That's how fascists win. But they never make anything better. All they do is dismantle democracies to entrench their own power. So just like in the 1930s, we have a political choice to make. Do we want to be a country of prosperity and equality, or will we succumb to hatred, authoritarianism, and destruction? Now, I said I was going to share 3 stories today, but I actually have a 4th one. Because sometimes when I talk about things in the past and I talk about history, it feels a little disconnected for people. It's not enough to get people to think about or realize that we can change stuff today. So I want to tell you why this time I believe it's possible to stop this authoritarian coup and to build a society that works for all, the way FDR did in the 1930s. I want to tell you why I'm an optimist. Because I would not be running for Congress if I didn't believe we can fix this. So I worked for Bernie Sanders' presidential campaign in 2016. But when it became clear that even if Bernie won, he wouldn't be able to do the political revolution without a Congress to back him, a group of us from that campaign split off and started a group called Justice Democrats. And our goal was simple. We wanted to recruit people who weren't career politicians to run for Congress. Teachers, doctors, nurses, engineers, factory workers, service workers, the people who actually run our society. People who wouldn't take any corporate money and who shared a vision for building an economy that worked for everybody. And that experience of recruiting people for Justice Democrats, that gives me hope today. Because I talked to hundreds of people all across the country doing incredible work. The kinds of leaders who, if they were in Congress today, they really could turn everything around. AOC was just one of those leaders. And then I saw how an act of political courage could lead to real change. In 2018, I ran AOC's first campaign, and after she won, I went to DC with her as her chief of staff. And I was in charge of writing and launching the Green New Deal. And our idea was really simple. Climate change is not just a crisis, it's actually the greatest opportunity of our lifetime to build a new, clean, high-wage economy and reverse decades of economic devastation. Back then, no one was really saying that, and the climate plans out there were way too small. But then AOC did something incredible. On her very first day in DC, she risked her entire political career and joined Sunrise Movement for a sit-in in Speaker Pelosi's office. Now, she did in a very respectful way. She told Speaker Pelosi, we're doing this to show you that the people have your back if you want to go big on climate. But still, think about that, right? Doing a sit-in in your boss's office on your first day at work. It took some courage. But that one act, it changed everything. Because while Sunrise continued putting pressure on the representatives on the outside, we were on the inside calling up everyone in Congress, telling them to sign on to a Green New Deal. While Sunrise was showing up to the presidential town halls, asking them, what's your plan? We were on the inside, calling up the staffers of the presidential candidates, giving them advice, telling them to go bigger, pushing them, getting them to come up with their own plans. And the thing is, that strategy of inside-outside organizing, it worked. Suddenly, everybody running for president in 2020 had to respond with their own climate plans, and they did. Even Joe Biden. He ran on Build Back Better in that cycle, which eventually became the Inflation Reduction Act, which actually passed, and it created the largest investment in climate change in history. So that's what one person in Congress working with a movement can accomplish. Now imagine a movement of leaders with that kind of courage, a movement of leaders who are not going to take corporate and lobbyist money, who are willing to push. Those leaders are out there. I know because I've met many of them, and many of them are already stepping up and starting to run for office. And the best part is this. If that movement takes power, everything we want to accomplish is not just possible to do, it is overwhelmingly popular to do. Not just in San Francisco, but all across the country. The people are on our side. People are demanding transformational change because they know the small reforms are simply not cutting it to make life livable. We can guarantee healthcare to everyone as a human right in the world, or in America, through Medicare for All, because every other developed nation in the world does it. We can create universal childcare. We can make public colleges and trade schools tuition free because guess what? We actually used to have that before. We can create millions of jobs by building a clean economy. We can make housing affordable by building millions of units of affordable housing and getting private equity and hedge funds and rent speculators out of our housing market. We can cut our utility bills here in San Francisco by moving to public power because they have that in Sacramento and they pay 40% less on their utility bills than we do. We can tax the wealth of the billionaires and, yes, the centimillionaires too. We can ban the revolving door between Congress and the lobbying industry. We can ban members of Congress from trading stocks. We can get rid of big money in politics by overturning Citizens United and moving to a fully publicly financed election system. And we can stop funding endless wars and stop sending taxpayer dollars to Israel, which is continuing a genocide right now in Gaza. Now look, I know these are dark times, and I know it's easy to feel despair when you watch what's happening in Washington and all across the country, but I want you to remember political choices created this crisis, and political choices can solve it. My father's childhood of poverty and displacement was a result of political failure. But his ability to build a middle-class life in America, that was a result of political success. We have the power to choose what kind of society we want. In the Unitarian Universalist tradition, you all believe in the inherent worth and dignity of every person. You believe in justice, equity, and compassion. It's a moral project, and we need that today because the work ahead isn't just political, it's moral. It's about what kind of society do we want to be. It's about whether we believe everyone deserves a decent life or just a lucky few. It's about whether we believe in collective responsibility for one another or whether it's everyone for themselves. Right now, if there's any silver lining to this current moment, it is that anything is possible. But it's going to require more than just one person in Congress. It's going to require a movement. It will require all of us, because change doesn't happen from the top down. It happens in rooms like this with people like you. So I'm running for Congress not because I have all the answers. I'm running because I believe in us. I believe in the city, I believe in the values we share, and I believe that together we can prove that democracy can work to make people's lives better. We can show that the ideal of San Francisco, a diverse, innovative, fair, and just society, isn't just possible, it's the best way forward. We've done this before, we can do it again. Thank you.
Thank you, Saikat. We have some questions from Zoom and some from the room already. And
All
those
right.
of you who haven't jotted down a question on a note card, feel free to do that, and we'll ask them right now. Let's see. How important is it to solve California's significant budget deficit?
It's important, and this is one of the things I try to hammer home sometimes, because sometimes when I talk about these problems and I'm talking about these national issues, some people ask me, well, how does it relate to San Francisco or to California, right? And I actually think a lot of the problems that we face, and I'm going to get back to budget deficit, but a lot of the problems that we face, whether it's the homelessness crisis, the drug addiction crisis, the mental health illness crisis, we actually can't solve these problems on our own in San Francisco or in California, because you see versions of these problems pretty much everywhere. And the budget is a great example of this, in the city budget at least. If you look at the largest rise in costs for employees in the city budget, it's healthcare costs. And healthcare is something that the city can't fix on its own. Healthcare is something that we have to fix as a nation. And if we leave it to the city to do it, the only answer would be to keep cutting other services over and over again, because the healthcare costs are just skyrocketing. And the same sort of thing is happening in the California budget, because the state does have to balance its budget. It's very difficult for a state to run without balancing its budget. But the country has the ability to help states, and the country has the ability to create these structural solutions. And I'm talking about things like when we're funding Muni and BART, the country can fund that. We can divert money away from highway expansion projects to fund Muni and BART. That helps the state budget, right? So that's why I think national politics, federal politics actually matters for what we can do in the state and the city.
Thank you. Along those lines, the affordable housing crisis is acute here in San Francisco, but it's a problem all across the country, as I'm hearing. So what could be done about that?
Yeah, so my fundamental view on housing is we need to be building housing and planning housing like infrastructure. Currently, we have a pretty much completely market-driven system where it's reliant on the booms and busts of capital cycles. And instead, when I look at countries like Singapore or Finland or Austria, Vienna and Austria, the way they treat housing is to actually plan it out. Think about what's the population that's going to be coming in, how much housing do we need, and build just make sure enough housing gets built to fulfill that. So what I propose to do at a federal level is A, make those plans, B, create a public bank to actually finance those plans and make sure we're building the affordable housing that we need, C, we got to make it legal to build social housing again. This is something a lot of people don't know, but we have something called the Faircloth Amendment that actually makes it illegal to build new public housing. Well, I think we're hamstringing ourselves in the face of this crisis. We should be able to build public housing. And then we also need solutions to actually keep renters from being displaced. We need solutions from keeping speculators from increasing the cost. So it's kind of an all-of-the-above approach, but we actually have to plan and execute and finance and build it.
Thank you. I really liked your story about how FDR used the New Deal to help bring the country back from the precipice of fascism. I was not aware of that history. We are in a moment like that. Do you think that the Green New Deal, or however it's rebranded, could do that? And also, how to sort of change the negative perceptions of green? I hear that Trump's been very successful about making green a kind of a bad thing.
Yeah, I think, yes. I'd say one of my, probably the main thing that made me decide to run for office this time was Trump being elected again. And I fundamentally believe what I said there, which is that if we can succeed in getting democracy to make people's lives better through a large-scale plan, because a lot of people believe that we want to use democracy to make people's lives better. I'd say where the difference is when I talk to a lot of, I'd say, establishment Democrats, hopefully that's the word I can use in here, but establishment Democrats, they just don't believe that level of positive change is possible. They're proposing small iterative solutions, whereas I think we have to shoot for dramatically improving people's lives, and it's possible to do, but it's not possible to do with the current tools we have available to us. We do need a larger plan. We need massive public investment. We need to be able to help people actually afford to live a life in America. So something like the Green New Deal, or what we're trying to push, which is the Mission for America, which is really the Green New Deal with a lot of details filled in, I think is a way to do that. And it's really the way we wrote the Mission for America is very informed by what FDR did during the New Deal and World War II. It's trying to recreate a lot of those institutions that I mentioned that we've lost since then. Now, when it comes to the green label, I think this is one of those cases of Democrats just preemptively deciding they've lost a battle, because even after all of the negativity towards the green stuff that Trump's done, if you poll people in this country, they do think climate change is still a problem. They believe it's real. They just don't always think it's the most important problem. So I do think the way you pitch it is not necessarily as this is just the way to solve climate change, but also this is the way to fix the economy. Like right now, everybody agrees that this economy is way too expensive, and jobs for middle class and working class people are disappearing. This is the way to bring that back.
What are your views on the Electoral College? Do you think it should be dismantled, and could it be?
I would love for it to be dismantled. The could it be is a harder part. I mean, in general, my political philosophy on a lot of this stuff, as you guys may have picked up, is the answer to could it be is whether we can create a public movement large enough to completely change the bounds of what's possible. And the reason I think it's possible is when I look at, I kind of have this historical lens. Like I kind of think that when you look back at the last, say, 100 years, we went through these specific political eras. We had sort of the New Deal era starting with FDR up until about Reagan, right? And in that era, both parties had to govern like New Deal parties. Even, Eisenhower couldn't gut the social safety net. He still had high taxes on the rich. And then Reagan came in, and that ushered in the new Reagan neoliberal era. And in that era, Democrats like Clinton had to govern like Reagan-style Democrats. And I really believe that ever since the Great Recession, voters have been saying, what's the new era? That, I think the election of Barack Obama, the election of Donald Trump, it was anybody running on bold, sweeping economic change, anyone calling for a big shock to the system, they keep winning. And voters are really open to what that change looks like. That's why you got so many people voting for Barack Obama one cycle, and then Trump the next cycle, then Biden, and then Trump again. So to me, the big work in front of us is defining that new era. And in the context of defining that era, you have to create a public movement. And so things that once seemed completely impossible, like abolishing the Electoral College, could suddenly become possible if we actually make it part of the new sort of structure of everything that we're pushing. So I'm really not someone who loves to say like, these are the three policies I'm for, because I think we actually have to pitch the whole plan to improve society, which includes the political fixes as well.
Thank you. We have several questions on AI. Everyone's talking about AI these days. One person asked, what are its effects on workers and what is the path forward? I'm wondering about what kind of regulation you would support on AI, and could it be a part of the solution? You're talking about a new Green New Deal. Can AI be a positive thing that way? Yeah,
it's a great question. So in the short term, I do believe we need more regulation around what I think of as inappropriate use of AI. And so what I mean by that is you've got health insurance companies using AI to deny health insurance claims. In California, we've actually done some regulation around this, but we shouldn't be doing that. That should be regulated. We have AIs interacting with children, these AI chatbots that are interacting with children, completely inappropriate. I think we need regulation around that. In the long run, though, I think there's this larger question of we've got this disruptive technology that's coming in with the potential to really harm workers and accumulate even more capital to the richest people. And I kind of really compare it to, say, how automation was introduced in our car manufacturing industry. Because when you look at the history of that, in Germany, when they had automation coming into car manufacturing, their car manufacturers, they have industry and government and labor, who all sit on the boards of their car manufacturers. And they make some plans. They do a little bit of industrial planning. They make 5 and 10 year plans. And so the result of automation in car manufacturing in Germany was at the end of 10 years, their workers made double the wages of their American counterparts. They also made more cars per capita than America, and they actually had more automation than America. So I think it is possible for AI to be used, for the productivity gains from AI to be used for the benefit of the many, not just the few. But it's sort of downstream from that same problem of we don't have any state capacity to do planning like that. We don't talk about labor actually being a part of the decision making the way that they should be. We don't have any way to even determine where technology goes like this. And the result of that is that if we go the route we're going right now, we are just going to have chaos and displacement and destruction for workers, and I think is the wrong way. I think we got to do better.
What is your understanding of the houseless and mental health issues and drug dependency population that has increased, and what can be done about that?
Yeah, so I believe that it's downstream from the fact that we have a cost of living and affordability crisis in San Francisco and really all across the country, because you do see versions of this all across the country. And I think fundamentally, if we can't tackle the problem of housing affordability, I think we're always going to be playing catch up on the problem of the houseless and drug addiction crisis we see on the streets. So that's step one, is how do we make housing affordable? And then step two, which is if we've got to that point and now we have folks on the streets who are often need a lot of help, I think the way to tackle that is going to require individualized support, but I think it's doable, because if you actually look at the unsheltered population on the streets of San Francisco, it's a few thousand people. It's big, but it's not an amount that's overwhelmingly big. And one of the things that really upsets me whenever I hear some discourse about this, like a lot of people point out to this graph where they say San Francisco spending on the houseless has been going up like this and the number of people on the streets has been flat. Well, the reason it keeps going up like that is because the number of people becoming houseless every single year is going up like that. So we keep having to spend more and more money just to keep the unsheltered population on the street the same, right? So we have to solve the root cause, and then we have to give people the individualized support they need to actually get off drugs, get well, get into that housing they need, and get the help they need.
We have several questions relating to technology in Silicon Valley. One person wanted to know how you would solve their corporate tax evasion in Silicon Valley. Another asks, what is the role of tech CEOs in building a mission-based economy? Back in FDR's era, it was manufacturing. Today, it looks like it's tech. So what can and should the government be doing in enlisting the tech industry in the plans you have talked about? Yeah,
so when it comes to the taxes, we have a very complex tax structure that gives the wealthiest and the corporations all kinds of ways to get out of having to pay taxes, and that simply needs to be fundamentally fixed. I think we start at ground one. We make a simple tax structure where you can't get away with it, right? You have to pay minimum taxes. There's not all these billions of different write-offs. It's not all these trusts you can create to create loopholes. We just have to tax our corporations fairly. And there's going to be a lot of corporations that fight against it. There's a lot of corporations. The argument that you always hear is, well, if you do this, then the companies will flee America. Where are they going to go? I don't think they're going to flee America. We've got the consumer base here. We've got the people who can actually build this stuff here. I think we really, as a country, devalue ourselves when we are at the mercy of corporations and deciding what tax structure to do. We can absolutely tax the richest and we can tax corporations fairly. Now, when it comes to what role do tech CEOs have, so during the era of FDR, when he was doing this World War II mobilization, he did have people from private industry who came in to help. He had there was a guy, Bill Knudsen, who was this Danish engineer who basically helped build up the modern day assembly line at Ford, and he created GM. And he quit that job and led the mobilization effort for America. And he went around helping all the factories develop. But the thing that was really important about the way we interacted with companies back then, sort of the relationship we had, government was in charge and the economy was working towards the goals we were setting as a nation, right? And there were CEOs who didn't like that. There were CEOs who said, we don't want to be a part of this mission. We want to keep doing our own for-profit stuff that's going to harm the country. and we just didn't accept it. So I'd say, yes, to the extent that we have CEOs or people in industry who want to be a part of it to actually do the good stuff, of course, we want the expertise, we want the help to actually make it happen. But it can't be the way the relationship is right now. But the relationship right now is whenever we talk about bringing people in from private industry to government, they're the ones who run it, and they change the rules to help them. And part of this, frankly, is that government itself needs to increase our ability to manage this. So I'll just give one quick example. When we were contracting with private industry to create the ships during the ship build-out in World War II, the Navy also built its own ships. And what that meant was that the Navy knew how much it cost to build a ship. The Navy knew all the technical expertise for building a ship. And so when private companies came to negotiate a contract and they tried to overcharge us, or they said we can't do this or can't do that, the Navy could say, no, you're wrong. We build ships. We know how much it costs. It was called the yardstick method. We should do stuff like that again.
You said that U.S. healthcare is the best in the world. Could you please say more about your belief?
Not right now. I said it was the best when we first created it, we had some of the best healthcare in the world. Yeah, right in the post-war era. I would say right now, I do distinguish from healthcare providers. I do think the U.S. has incredible talent in our healthcare system, but our health insurance system and the way we administer healthcare is completely and fundamentally and utterly broken. And so I actually, I call for Medicare for all because I think that's where a lot of the movement's at. But I actually think we have to go a step further, because if you look at the real problem of healthcare in this country right now, it's not just an insurance problem. We have a coverage problem. About 95% of counties in the country right now do not have access to quality healthcare. And it's just a system that the market can't solve. It won't solve. So to me, the obvious answer to this is we should directly provide healthcare the way they do in the UK, the way we currently do with the VA. And the VA is actually a great system given the amount of money we give it. It's a great system. I was looking this up recently. People often complain about the VA wait times. Well, guess what? The VA has shorter wait times right now than our private healthcare system. The VA handles all of emergencies. Whenever we had COVID, the VA was going around setting up all the COVID testing sites because they have that capacity. I'd love to see us invest in the VA, create a VA for all system where we're directly providing healthcare to people and covering, this is important, covering everything, right? Not healthcare shouldn't, but your eyes and your teeth and your body are all part of your body. It should all be healthcare.
Thank you. Now we have several questions concerning the Trump administration and the sense of emergency that almost everyone here in this community feels about the current situation. Why do we call Donald Trump's 2025 program fascism? Should we call it fascism or authoritarianism, or rather dictatorship? Which word is the most clear?
Is there an option D, all of the above? But I actually... because I used to call it just authoritarianism for a long time, and I started just kind of reading up on what is the fascist ideology, because people on the right always say, like, this is not fascism. But fascism is an ideology that is based on authoritarianism, that is doing a nationalist project based on an idea that certain people belong and others don't. And I think that's what we are, and it's using force to enforce those projects. Trump is sending the military into our cities using force to enforce his ideology. He's talking about mobilizing our counterterrorism surveillance state infrastructure to go after anybody who says things anti-American or anti-Christian, right? He's going after free speech. To me, that it has crossed the line into fascism. It's no longer just a project of him trying to stay in power forever. He's also enforcing an ideology on people.
A member of our committee just returned from D.C., where they were in a concerted effort to mass enough people in a peaceful protest to drive Trump from power. Would you publicly support such an effort? Maybe ask your friends in D.C. to do likewise.
Absolutely, yeah. It sounds like a great effort. Right now, I think there is a role for legislators right now that is not just about policymaking. Because when I look at this creep of authoritarianism, and I didn't get so much into this in my speech, but I think the way authoritarianism works is it's this constant process of making the abnormal normal, and it's this creep, right? It's this creep that's trying to just like make it so that this is the normal thing to do, and then a few years pass by, and before you know it, we have Trump for a third term and no one bats an eye. And I think the way you defeat that is a couple of things. One, it's a daily fight to keep pointing out this is abnormal. And the second piece is we actually need to have civil society be this bulwark against this creeping authoritarianism. And I think a major role of politicians today should not just be going to DC and legislating. It should be actually actively organizing civil society to be that bulwark against fascism, because I think that's our only hope. I think that means that, thank you for the sign. Appreciate that. I think that means that you need legislators going out and being a part of movements like what this member is doing to give it power, give it voice. I think it means you need people in power showing up when ICE is in our city, picking people up off the streets, because when you have a position of power, you have privilege. You have much more privilege than the people who are getting kidnapped, and you can use that privilege. And I've seen some examples of it working. When ICE was going through LA and they were marching through MacArthur Park, Karen Bass showed up and she said, "I'm not leaving until you do," and it worked. She put the ball in their court to escalate the situation, and they weren't willing to do it. And the other part of organizing civil society is when Trump is going after law firms or universities or media companies, and he goes after them one at a time, it's very difficult for them to oppose Trump. They kind of fall like dominoes. I think legislators should be going out there and trying to collectively organize them as blocks to oppose Trump, because Trump can't go after every law firm. Then he's on the back foot. So there's just this new role. But yeah, short answer is I'm glad that that's what this member is doing, and I wish there were more legislators supporting efforts like this to organize civil society against them.
A second question from the same person. You mentioned post-World War II prosperity, but wouldn't you agree that much of that prosperity was due to the U.S. becoming the largest and most lethal imperial power, inheriting the colonialism that France, England, and other powers could no longer hold on to?
Yeah, there's I'd say there's two versions of this story, right? And I'd say there's one version of the American story post-war that was the good stuff that I'd like to recreate. And then there's another version of it that came a little bit later that was our turn towards a new kind of foreign policy that I'd say was very destructive and in the long run actually harmed us. So first version I think of as things like the Marshall Plan, where the way we interacted with the rest of the world was by investing in the rest of the world, helping them develop, helping the entire world come out of this post-war era. And that was not all good, but it was generally a force for good. And it was seeing the world as a positive sum entity where other countries' fates are tied with our fate. We're all going to grow up, get out of this together. But then I would say partially because other countries in the world started to face a real threat, partially because of the perceived threat from the USSR, kind of the Cold War era, we moved into this foreign policy doctrine of trying to enforce our position in the world through military might and through destructive wars. And in the short term, that did solidify our position as being on top. But I'd say in the long run, it has more than proven to be the cause of our ultimate demise. We now have a country that has a completely unsustainable defense budget with no accountability, with no auditing. We're stretched thin all across the world. And the result of our last several decades of military imperialism has been we've got so much of the world actively hating us. And for years, we thought we could maintain that because there weren't any other real global superpowers that could compete with us. Well, now there are. And I think we have to fundamentally break this model and get back to a place where we are treating other superpowers as peers, we are treating other countries as peers, we're respecting their sovereignty, and we're helping them develop as a way to have them be our allies.
Thank you. How much of your time in Congress will be spent focused on San Francisco versus promoting your vision for all of the USA, fundraising for other congressional people versus San Francisco's needs?
It's a great question. So especially in my first term, right, in 2026, none of the larger things I'm talking about will be possible. I'm going to be frank about that. I'm not going to be able to pass Medicare for all with Donald Trump in the White House. So my focus in 2026 on day one is going to be able to build the best constituent services office I possibly can. And this is a thing that, actually, out of curiosity, how many people in the audience know what a constituent services office for a congressperson is? There we go. Yeah. Yeah, a lot of people don't realize this because congresspeople don't actually advertise it because a lot of congresspeople think it's annoying to have to deal with their constituents. But your congressperson is supposed to be your main point of contact to the federal government. And that means that if you get attacked, if you have a spouse in detention, if you don't get a social security check, you go to your congressperson's constituent services office and we advocate for you and we fight for you. And that is 10 times more important today than at any other point, because I think the number one crisis we're going to be facing over the next 4 years is Donald Trump's direct attacks on constituents in San Francisco. That will always be my number one priority. Now, I had some experience helping AOC set up her constituent services office in 2018. Trump was still in power then, or Trump had just come into power then. He was doing an all-out war on immigrants, and she was in the most immigrant-heavy district in the country. And it was really amazing to see how a call from a congressperson or even a staffer from the congressperson's office really could make a difference. You could get a citizenship application moving, you could get someone out of detention, and it's just this thing of when you have an authoritarian government that's trying to do this, they are still dealing with a fairly slow-moving federal bureaucracy. So if there is a fleet-footed congressional office really fighting every single day, you can make real difference and you can really defend people. Now, in the long run, I do want to make it clear, like, yes, I'm going to fight for money into district every chance I can get for all the various problems we have, but I really do think we have to do these structural changes. And my theory for the case of how we get there, if there's an easier way to get there, someone should let me know, but my theory for the case is we do have to build this movement that fixes these problems at a national level, and that is how we solve the problems for San Francisco. I don't think we're going to be able to solve our housing crisis or our healthcare crisis or healthcare cost of healthcare crisis or our utility bills, or our lack of cost of childcare crisis, all by ourselves in the city. So to me, those two things are tied. I'm doing it because we face these crises hardest here. The cost of living crisis is worst here. I think we need to be a city that's pushing the bounds of what's politically possible.
Thank you. We know you care a lot about climate change. The Green New Deal is one of your signature policy initiatives. What do you think about nuclear energy? And a second question is, what did you think of Gavin Newsom attending the COP summit that was held, I think, last week? Trump administration sent no one.
Okay. Gavin did attend?
I think he did, yeah.
Okay, that's good. So when it comes to nuclear, and I want to be clear here. So I run a think tank called New Consensus, and our goal is to just get to the truth. So I don't have an ideological position on any of this stuff. So if anybody has evidence disagreeing with me, please tell me, and we'll try to update what we have. But I do think right now, with when it comes to solving climate change, we have a host of solutions available to us that all have their trade-offs. If you look at solar power, there's a land use trade-off. If you look at lithium-ion batteries today, it's very destructive the way we do lithium-ion mining. Nuclear, I think, is largely safe. From all the research we've done, it's a very safe technology. It's, in fact, safer than solar and wind in terms of manufacturing, in terms of deaths per kilowatt hour of energy produced. And we do need some solution, whether that's nuclear or geothermal or what have you, that provides our baseload power if we want to get off of coal and natural gas. So the answer is yes, I'm pro-nuclear power. I do believe if we should try to expand it as a way to create sustainable and consistent energy in our system. And there's countries, like France has a large nuclear fleet, and they've managed to handle that safely for decades. But yeah, of course, I know this is a polarizing topic. So if anyone out there has evidence that I don't know about, please present it to our think tank. We're a learning group, so we're trying to write the actual plans that'll solve this stuff. When it comes to Gavin attending COP, I think it's great. I mean, at the end of the day, we've gone so far away from doing any sort of international agreements. I think one of the really destructive moments we're at right now is in this period of nationalism. We are losing all our ties with other countries, with other cities, and I think there's certain challenges that we face that we really won't be able to do on our own as a nation. When I talk about climate change, that's a big one. I think it's the same thing potentially with something like AI, because one threat of AI I didn't talk about is this whole idea of runaway AI, right? Where maybe the AI gets so smart that it's actually a destructive force on humanity. to control something like that, we need international cooperation. To control nuclear weapons, we need international cooperation. So I do think it's good to try to maintain that wherever we can.
I think Gavin Newsom might have vetoed a AI regulation bill.
Oh, really?
I think he did, yes. I'm not sure.
Okay, well, I don't know what the bill is, but
This is a comment. Someone suggested reading a book called Wealth Supremacy by Marjorie Kelly.
okay.
Someone suggested a book to read, Wealth Supremacy by Marjorie Kelly of Democracy Collaborative.
I'll tell Zach. Zach's my campaign manager and also my co-founder at New Consensus and Justice Democrats and was my boss on Bernie. So Zach, write that down.
All right, just a couple more questions. Your stories are beautiful. Why aren't you running for Congress in Fort Worth, Texas?
Well, because I've lived in San Francisco for the majority of my adult life. I would feel like a carpetbagger in Fort Worth, Texas. But, I moved here when I was 23 and have lived here for probably about 12 years now total, minus like a few years that I was out there working for AOC and Bernie. So I have no ties to Fort Worth at this point. My family's moved away from Fort Worth as well.
This is the greatest city, in my opinion, so
It is.
I understand why you want to be here.
I mean, I decided to be here because I love the city, as I was mentioning.
Definitely. Okay, finally, people want to connect with your campaign. How can they do that?
It's a great question. I would, first off, if I didn't get to any questions, I do want to say, please go to my website. It's saikat.us, SAIKAT.us. The first thing you see on there, I don't ask for money. I ask for you to join a Zoom call with me. I do them every weekday. It's how I've been meeting folks directly and answering all the questions. But if you want to be involved in the campaign, please sign up to volunteer. We are trying to run the largest grassroots operation that I think the city's ever seen. We're trying to talk to hundreds of thousands of voters. We've already had over 2,000 volunteers sign up, and we've knocked on over 40,000 doors in the city. So we're well on our way. But even if you don't want to knock on doors, we do phone banks, we do farmers markets, we host events. We're building all kinds of tech tools on the campaign, actually, to do door knocking better. So any skills you've got, I'd love to get your help, and it is going to take a movement like that to win this campaign. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming today.
Thanks so much for having me. Appreciate it, Jeff.
All right. Thank you, everyone. And please come back next Sunday. We'll have Tim Redmond from 48 Hills talking about the state of San Francisco. And on the 30th of this month, we have a presentation called Care, Not Cops. Thank you.